we will get started with the Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting for December. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Great, so we'll go ahead, we'll call this meeting to order and have Scott please call the roll.
Tomas Delgado.
Present.
Madeline Garbaz.
Here.
Stacy Gloss.
Here.
Jessica Lemcool.
Here.
Andrew Stump.
Here.
Morgan White. Morgan is sick, she emailed. Grace Wilkin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. We'll now move into the approval of minutes from our previous meeting. You should have received the minutes in the draft packet. Is there a motion to approve?
We'll move to approve the minutes from October 5th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that move.
Thank you, Jess. Any discussion, changes or corrections for the minutes from October 5th? Okay, not hearing any at this time. I'll have Scott go ahead and call the roll for a vote to approve. Sorry, Grace, go ahead. I missed your hand.
Just a question. I think they look good. There was no changes. Just something I'm wondering about in general when we count people as present, because it just says commissioners present, not like via Zoom or something. And I don't know how we're supposed to list it, but that was a Zoom one. So it says like Urbana City Building and Zoom. And I feel like sometimes, at least for council, we list like who was in person if some were and who was on Zoom. I don't know if it matters, but that's my only thought on that.
I don't have a sense of what other commissions are doing in terms of that recording. I don't know that I have a preference either way, but I do agree that consistency would be important.
I can look into what the other commissions are doing.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions?
You want to call the roll on that?
Yeah. Oh, me?
Would you like me to call the roll on that?
Yes, I thought I asked. Go ahead.
Tomas Delgado.
Yes.
Madeline Garbaz.
Yes.
Stacy Gloss.
Yes.
Jessica Lemcool.
Yes.
Andrew Stump.
Yes.
Grace Wilkin.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any people attending as an attendee in the meeting. So we will move on past public input and just move into, are there any additions or changes to the agenda this evening? Okay, next on the agenda, Scott, will you go ahead and provide the staff report?
Sure. Good evening. Some updates. First, closed the landfill through a vendor. Staff has been doing some woody vegetation removal. We've done that on both sides of the landfill this year, both on the city landfill side and the Champaign-Urbana solid waste disposal system side. We've now published an invitation for bid for a new well installation on the Champaign CUSWDS side of the landfill. That's a up gradient sampling well. So we'll hope to get that installed early next year. Geothermal, the city's working with the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois and all of our traditional supporters for renewable energy programming on a second round, 2022 round of Geothermal Urbana Champaign. So we're hoping to have another successful round of bulk geothermal energy installation. On landfill solar, the low-income community solar array is now commercially operational. So all those folks who are signing up for subscriptions should be rolled into activating those subscriptions very soon. The Landscape Recycling Center, we've been working with the Champaign County Environmental Stewards, and they've received a grant from the Lumpkin Family Foundation to organize a food scrap collection and composting program. So a big portion of what that grant is funding is some infrastructure improvements at the LRC that will allow us to accept some limited amount of pre-consumer commercially generated food scrap, which we will cover and compost and blend into our leaf compost, which is what becomes the screened garden compost. So we're moving forward with that, met with a potential hauler recently, and folks are working on gaining interest from potential generators. Public engagement, we had some interviews with Good Morning Illini about some of the products and services that the Landscape Recycling Center produces. Moving on to U-Cycle, we've got some data, some outcomes from the recent countywide electronics recycling event. You can see we're still bringing in and recycling a lot of electronics. And so it's great to get those, keep those out of the landfill and get them back into a reuse and recycling stream. We also, U-Cycle program also partnered with the Urbana Park District and on a series of really targeted drop-off recycling events recently. And that was for America Recycles Day. You can see some of the notes there. There's a note here that the CDs and DVDs were sent to the Idea Store. It was actually a national vendor. I got an update on that from Courtney Kwong, recycling coordinator. Their name escapes me. Maybe I can find it here real quick. But it was Green Disc, National Recycling Electronics Recycling Firm, Green Disc. Moving on, Solar Urbana Champaign, our sixth year, currently has 16 contracts totaling 119 kilowatts of capacity booked. So that's great. That gets us through our first declining price block. I think 150 would be our second one. Be great to get to that second one. We'll see how we end up closing out, but we're probably getting close to the end there. On the agenda, or on the staff report, I have a proposed SAC commission calendar or schedule for next year, and the commission should vote pursuant to state statute and adopt a schedule for next year. And our next SAC meeting would be February 1st at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
Great, thank you for the presentation. It sounds like there's a lot of great stuff going on right now. Does anyone have any questions? Sorry, I moved off my screen. Grace, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. I had a lot of smiley face notes too, if I may, just real quick. Smiley face notes for loving that the solar farm for low-income community solar was open, and the countywide electronics drop-off, and the compost project. Lots of great smiley faces. I had a few questions. Some was about the meeting schedule, saying council chambers, and I think you said it in an elegant way that was maybe too elegant. It escaped me, meaning like, unless we're still online, then we'll be on Zoom, right?
Unless we're, yeah, you are correct. Unless we're still online or, remote.
Okay, thank you. You said it very
I guess a better way to put it is we're going to be remote until further notice.
Okay, so it says council chambers, but otherwise on Zoom, still Zooming.
Yeah, there's a legal requirement to publish the meeting location, and that continues even though folks are still on Zoom because the rules still require one staff person and one commission member to be present.
Okay, thank you. And then for the landfill sampling well, just out of curiosity, I was wondering what we do with that information.
We work with a geotechnical consultant who reviews that information and interprets it for us. We report it to the sanitary district as well, because we do pump a little bit of leachate to them. And as part of our permit, they want disclosure of those test results. And we test for a number of parameters, and it's been many, many years before we've ever had an exceedance on any of those parameters. Typically, most of the sampling results are reported as below detectable limits.
Because it's sampling just the leachate, or it's a well going in the landfill that's sampling?
We actually have the groundwater underneath the landfill has a movement from east to west. And so we have one well, which is essentially upstream on the east side, and we have another sampling well on the west side, which, so there's the before condition and the after condition.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just nerdily interested in that. So I don't know if it could be available to, SAC, or if it's on the website or something, but I'd be interested.
Yeah, I can share it.
Great. Thank you. I have a few more, but I'll see if anyone else has some.
One question, Scott. Who is sort of being considered for the food scrap generators that the Champaign County Environmental Stewards are sort of arranging?
What we're focusing on, so this is a pilot project, what we're focusing on is a small number of larger pre-consumer food scrap generators. So a great example of a generator that fits all those would be a grocery store. So they prep vegetables, and they have vegetable waste when things go bad before it's sold. And that's all pre-consumer. So consumers haven't half eaten anything. And it's also, in that sense, is very controlled. Everyone who's touching that material flow is an employee. And so that's different than trying to collect food scrap at a restaurant or a diner or something of that nature, where you have to rely on the behaviors of many different customers to put things in the right bin. So that's what we're focusing on, is keeping a very clean, uncontaminated load, and not having lots of little loads from generators, but for a pilot, starting with a small number of large generators.
Okay. And is the group considering hauler being just a private hauler, or maybe contracting with a sanitation service that's already working?
No, it would be a private hauler. The city doesn't have, the city doesn't own a packer truck or provide hauling services.
No, I meant like a trash, like contracting with like a trash company.
Exactly. Private hauler, okay. Private trash company.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Grace?
Thanks. I don't know. I hope maybe this is an appropriate time for it, but just some other ideas just related to staff stuff. And I imagine we could have longer conversations about all of this, but some recent stuff I've been thinking about was some stuff got brought up with council meetings from the public too about plastic waste reduction, which is something I've definitely been interested in. I feel like I've probably asked Scott before and I don't remember the good answer he gave, and we don't have to get into all of it now either, but about possibly like bag fee or tax or ban for like plastic bags and looking at plastic waste reduction. And then also about like energy code updates, I think we briefly talked about. And so those are just other things when, if ever you feel appropriate to dive into. It doesn't have to be now. I'd love to know more from your staff perspective. And then also general one, I think it would be great to like check in with city council, just even like presentation, like 10 minutes, check in, like this is what we're doing, who we are, have a little bit of that connection, maybe talk about what we're doing with the bylaws and the great stuff that Scott's doing. I think it would be great to have some more connection there.
Grace, for the last one, do you mean to have city council members attend an SAC meeting or inviting a member of the SAC and Scott to present to a city council meeting? I'm just not sure what the mechanism you have in mind is.
Yeah, I think either one, but I was thinking more the second option of going to council because that is a wider audience in some ways, not
Sure.
by much, but a little bit.
Good ideas. Thank you.
And I can respond briefly just to give folks a direction to look into on plastic bag and energy code. There was a bill introduced into either the last General Assembly or the previous one, which proposed a plastic bag preemption and tax or fee, which the fees thereby being collected by the state, redistributed to the counties where the fees were generated to be spent at the discretion of the or in accordance with the county waste reduction plan or whatever the required state required plan is, state recycling plan, whatever it's called. And folks, recycling coordinators in this county had talked about that, and I think there was pretty substantial agreement that they would like to use that to fund household hazardous waste collection, because there's never enough of that. We never have enough funding for that. And so that's a very appealing opportunity to, there's been a lot of cities that have seen substantial reductions, not eliminations, but reductions in plastic bag use from fees. And if it can then also fund household hazardous waste, there's a lot to like about that. I don't know if that bill will be reintroduced in the future or not, but that's kind of what the landscape looks like. On energy code, there is a new International Energy Conservation Code. The state has a procedure whereby they adopt it, and I believe cities are obliged to subsequently adopt it. But the city of Urbana always subsequently adopts it after the state does. The last time I looked into that, it's going to take months for that to happen. It'd be great for that to happen right away. Some of the things that I think are really interesting about the Energy Conservation Code is there are some optional appendices for things like solar ready. And I think there's also, there might be an EV charging appendices too. So those are interesting to see, but that's kind of what that looks like now.
Thank you. And could I ask another question about that? With the bag tax and stuff, so that was countywide, statewide stuff. Do you know anything about Urbana as home rule municipality, if they would have the option of doing that as Urbana?
At present, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The proposed bill would preempt, it would make everything uniform across the state. But I believe the way it was written was any taxes or bans present at the time of the bill executing the bill would be grandfathered.
Cool. Interesting lines there. Thank you.
I just had one question. Like, how is the recycling stuff advertised? I think we talked about this before, I know, with the spring one, but just wondering like how we get the word out there on that kind of stuff besides like the city website,
Yeah, we use website, we use social media, depending on what's happening. We'll use yard signs on city properties and so forth. So for instance, leaf collection, we advertise with some yard signs. We do email marketing. and we work to generate earned media being, the news covers it without us having to pay for it, right? And advertising would be paid media.
I think the yard signs are helpful. Just an idea on that. The leaf one, even though I know I can look it up online, it's like I would find myself just driving past the sign to look at it instead of just looking at it online. So yeah, I think the yard signs are surprisingly helpful.
Sometimes the old ways are the best.
Yeah, those visible out there ways are sometimes the easiest for sure. It would be cool if we had some sort of marquee or something that would kind of really, because people just drive past, the city building all the time. I mean, driving, but just that would be really awesome.
And then I have just a couple of questions going back to landfill solar. I'm curious if you're receiving any reports, Scott, on how subscribed the project is, how many customers have subscribed to the community solar project, and if they are still taking new customers.
I'm not receiving reports. I haven't had contact with the vendor for some number of months, at least the subscription side of the vendor for some number of months. I take that as a sign that subscriptions are going well. We've certainly offered to support subscription promotional activities, and if they're not availing themselves of that opportunity, I take that as a sign that they're doing well getting it subscribed up.
Great. And then second question having to do with the Geothermal 2.0 program. Is the program still looking for community partner organizations to sponsor at this time?
Absolutely. If folks would like, if organizations would like to participate by, helping echo or promote the communications through their social media, through their email lists, other types of communications they have, we'd love to partner with organizations on that.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on the staff report? Awesome, great discussion, thank you. All right, so we have a little bit of time where we can delve a little bit more deeply into the food scrap pilot project at the Landscape Recycling Center. I think that Scott gave a little bit of some background and update, but we can have a little more discussion on that. I wasn't sure if there's a presentation or anything that's prepared for it, but Grace or Scott, if you have anything that you'd like to add to the discussion on the food scrap pilot program, that would be great for this time.
Yeah, I'd like to invite Grace to talk a little bit about it, because she was very involved with getting that grant and moving it forward, and also as was Susan Monty with the county. I can never remember if it's the county or the RPC, but she was instrumental in securing that grant as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say Scott covered a lot of the good bulk of the updates, but I had a few things I would add. Yeah, as you said, covered the grant money. And so Susan Monty is awesome at grant writing. She's an amazing grant person. I believe she works for the county, but this was through the nonprofit Champaign County Environmental Stewards. And she's the executive director of that, I believe. I'm one of the board members on that as well. And so that was through the nonprofit that allows for the, grant application and stuff to partner on this. And so, we're working on recruitment on that end. Tomas is already asking good questions, who it is, and, covered that it's commercial waste generators is who we're targeting first to reach that kind of volume to make it more economical for residential pickup. And we finally came up with something that I think was a very key missing piece that we didn't have, which is how much is it going to cost? So it's really hard to recruit places, because everywhere I've gone so far, they said, yes, they have general interest, but the question is, how much is it going to cost, because before they can make a commitment. So what the hauler came up with is $6 per 32-gallon dumpster, kind of like wheelie dumpster pickup. And we're talking about having paper bag liners in there. And so then if a restaurant or grocery store generated one of those 32 gallons dumpsters and had it picked up once a week, that'd be $24 a month. Ideally, that cost could be balanced with their decreased landfill trash volume. So maybe they could have a smaller dumpster. Maybe they could have their dumpster picked up less often because they won't have the food waste. That's the really stinky part of it. So we have a lot of things to figure out, and that's also the beauty of the pilot and starting small. So that's kind of our next round of recruiting. Is I need to update the flyer that I think y'all saw a while ago, but need to update that with like the cost information, and welcome you all too if you know others. We've talked to a few I've listed. I can send the list again, but if you have others that might be interested, we're looking for about a handful of commercial waste generators for the pilot project. And I believe people are still contacting Scott. Are you okay still being the contact point on that? Okay, awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
And then Scott can jump in and correct me if I'm jumping the gun, because I don't know if we specified this, but what I gathered from our last meeting was that we hope to be operating the pilot project by next spring or summer 2022. I wrote 2021 as next year, but it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of the steps, we need to take the grant funds and do a solicitation for these concrete bins that we're going to be collecting and the food scrap in. The vendor that has identified an interest in hauling needs to buy some equipment, and then we need to secure some generators.
And I'll be happy to send an updated flyer too. And I think it'll get passed around, but if you want to pass it within your networks as well. Like I said, we're looking for a handful. We don't have any commitment yet, so it's definitely open. But, if we do get like every restaurant in Urbana interested, we might have to back it down a little bit. But we're looking for a good handful to kind of learn as we go with the pilot, because it's new on all ends. So I think we'll be learning a lot from all the different aspects of it as we go.
Is
Grace,
the flight? Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Jess. I'm sorry.
That's just Urbana businesses only, right?
Right now it is, because the hauler that we're working with is only permitted in Urbana, to my understanding, but it doesn't have to be that way if we find another hauler that has permitting, all across. But again, with the pilot kind of starting small, so that is what it is now, but that's not a permanent thing in my mind.
Awesome. Super cool.
That's actually not a question that I've asked that hauler, so I don't know. He may or may not be permitted in Champaign.
I think they are limited to Urbana.
Okay.
It would be interested though if the business that participates or subscribes has more than one location, and if they have like a location that's Urbana or Champaign or both or something like that. So.
Yeah, and if we can, get other haulers, or, I think it has room to grow in the future. But my understanding is that they are only licensed or permitted or only allowed to pick up in Urbana right now for this hauler we're working with.
Got it. Is there going to be any type kind of like ribbon cutting events along with getting the ground pad in place?
That's a good idea.
Or the first, the first haul.
Yeah, you want to help organize?
Kind of funny to kind of take a picture next to some compost, but I think it's a great idea. We could do some kind of visibility and social media around it.
I think it's a good idea. You interested in heading up a ribbon cutting event, or?
I have no idea how to do that with the city, but yeah, I can explore that.
It sounds fun. I don't think it's anything we've thought of or that I would particularly be skilled at, but I think it would be a good idea.
We'd involve the mayor, I suppose. Okay.
I have one more question. does the Landscape Recycling Center or possibly even the Environmental Stewards Group, do they see like, or maybe this is already a process in determining like nutrient levels within the compost? Is there going to be any kind of like assessment of like maybe how much more nutrient abundant the compost becomes because of this this diversion of food waste, or is like any kind of data going to be sort of pulled out of maybe this pilot in that kind of a way?
That's a good question. The LRC already does testing for their permit. So that may be something we want to look into. The food scrap is going to be a very small volume of the total compost that becomes screen garden compost. So by the time it's blended in, it may not, measurably change the constituents. But I think that's a good question. I'll bring it up with the folks who do the testing.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
How often do they test? Is that annual or biannual?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Because I think that would be really cool. And yeah, even maybe a control I thought we were thinking of putting it into one of the piles. But anyway, Tomas, I think that's a great nerdy topic. And I expect that the phosphorus and potassium will increase from all this food stuff, is what I've seen in other compost stuff with food waste. So I think that's a great nerdy ideas.
There may also be an opportunity to partner with a soil science class at the University of Illinois. Maybe they would be interested in doing that testing and learning more about, learning more about the subject and reporting back on it to the city and to their classes and things like that.
Sounds good.
Maybe a kind of a, laboratory partnership.
Good ideas. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions on this subject? Okay. All right, next on the agenda is the vote to establish our meeting schedule for 2022. And so the meeting schedule published was in the staff report. If folks want to go back and look at that, we're looking at 9 meetings in 2022 with no meetings happening in January, July, because of the July 4th holiday that would fall very closely to it, and November, because it usually falls on a voting day. Are there any other questions, concerns, or discussion around the proposed 2022 schedule? Okay, the other thing to note is that we are leaving the time for 7 p.m. on the first Tuesday of the month. If at some point in the future, the whole group decides or has a discussion on if this day or time is not working and we want to find a different day or time, then we can also discuss that at a much later period.
And just a reminder, you will need a motion, second, and roll call.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the 2022 commission schedule, and also for that to be in council chambers and on Zoom, as long as we're still on Zoom until further notice?
I motion to approve the schedule, and whether it be on Zoom or in person.
Thanks, Jess. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Just one change that September 1 should be 2022.
The September one should be what?
Should be 2022, not 2021.
Oh, good catch.
And that's the 13th of September?
Yeah, it's the second Tuesday because I think there's a holiday on the first Monday, and that always pushes city council into council chambers on the second Tuesday.
Okay. All right, might need an extra reminder on that one when that comes up.
And do.
And is that determined on Zoom or not? It's the gubernatorial order about a disaster thing. Is that determined like by the commission, or are we going by what the overall city's doing? Do you have a sense on how we're doing Zoom or in person?
I think all of the board and commission meetings are on Zoom until further notice.
But just because the city said so, not like the commission?
I think it has to do with the gubernatorial orders.
Okay.
I think that I don't know that it's something to bring up in city council or to city council, Grace, but I know that other towns are meeting in person at this time, right? So I suppose that there's a question and maybe there's discretion city by city, and I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, my understanding is that the state says, we're back in person, but they allow for a public health emergency disaster declaration type thing. So for a while, we were even like reading that at the beginning of each meeting. I don't know if that just kind of umbrellaed all of the commissions, or if like each commission is declaring emergency because of public health stuff. I don't know, but.
Yeah, it may be accurate that we're supposed to be reciting some statement to that effect before all these Zoom meetings, but we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, definitely a good question for us as all the commissions and city to be on the same page about.
All right, Scott, will you please call the roll for the vote?
Tomas Delgado.
Yes.
Madeline Garbaz.
Yes.
Stacy Gloss.
Yes.
Jessica Lemcool.
Yes.
Andrew Stump.
Yes.
Grace Wilkin.
Yes.
Great, that motion passes, and we will see everybody in 2022 for the next set of meetings. Our next agenda item this evening is to complete, I think, our unfinished business around goal setting and prioritizing goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe one of the last steps that we had in using the Jamboard together was to prioritize projects that we as individuals would be interested in working on or prioritizing for the community. I'm not sure who has the ability to do a screen share right now, but I would like to pull up that Jamboard. And I'd also like to preface it by saying that I think that tonight will be the last night that we would be necessarily working together in this sort of planning process that we've been undertaking for the last several months. And that I'd like to move it towards having individuals on the commission, if they do identify tonight a project or a specific aspect that they're interested in working on, that we would stay in touch over the course of the next year so that you could provide updates on progress as part of kind of an agenda item in future meetings. But I think that tonight will be the last night for group work on the process. So again, trying to figure out who is able to do a screen share. It does not look like something I'm able to do from where I'm. Well, maybe I can. I do. It didn't look like I did at first. Do you have it? Do you have the... Yeah, I know, but do you have the link? Oh.
To the Jamboard? I was trying to...
Yeah, I think we have it handy.
To the Jamboard.
I could respond to the email that we all received for the meeting. If that's helpful.
or send a new one.
Okay, sending it to Scott right now.
There you go.
Well, it's probably, that works, right?
Yeah, for a share anyway, for sure.
Can you screen share, Jess?
I can. Yep.
That would be
I
great.
think so. Yep. Just 1 second.
Yeah, I see it. Well,
Yeah.
I see your screen anyway.
Yeah. Work my way there. Okay. So does everyone have the actual link for this though, so that they can actually just kind of, I think it would maybe just be best if we took some time to read through. And are we thinking we work on like 1, 2 things? Are there any rules about us working together on things? That would be a question I have as well. Like, is there a cap to how many people can work on a side project like this?
There are, but not when we're in a open meeting right now. So that's just when we're outside of a meeting.
Right.
Well, I think that's a good question, but I also kind of wonder if this becomes a project that you're interested in personally, but is not official business of the city at that point, then I don't think that the Open Meetings Act necessarily applies. For example, if I'm giving a presentation on a subject that I'm interested in and all of you were interested in it as well, but it wasn't SAC or city business, there's nothing that would prevent each of you from attending.
I agree. My understanding is if it's something we would vote on,
correct,
would be the thing. So I think some of these, I don't know,
So it just doesn't matter if 3 people wanted to work on something and it's just not a thing then, right? Even though we're kind of like reporting back on it and the brainchild came from here.
At this point, everything you're considering keeping in your planning is, things you're planning for the city. And so that sounds like city business. So in terms of this planning document and procedure, I think you might want to construe it or round it up as city business and applicable with the Open Meetings Act.
Okay, so that being said, like how many people could work on an item?
I think it's 2.
At any one time.
Okay.
As Stacy said, that doesn't mean that every shared interest topic is SAC or city business. But I think this document is pretty clearly intended to be SAC city business.
Okay. So just this document, so say we decide to provide educational resources to teachers. If 3 of us want to meet and create those materials, can we do that or no? That would be my question. Sorry.
I mean, I think no,
it's kind of an important question.
Scott or people from the city and staff are actively working on it. I don't know that, like, if the city isn't going to say this is a program of the city of Urbana, then I would say no. But if it's a program that we want the city to be involved in and to provide resources and provide staff time on it, then I think that does become city business. Does that distinction sort of fly?
If you're doing something as SAC members, then Open Meetings Act may apply. Is it business? Is it SAC or city business? If if members decide to take a notion and go off on their own and do something as private citizens or members of another group, then I would say the Open Meetings Act does not apply.
Even if, I don't know how Scott wants to navigate it, but, even have an attorney to ask these questions to instead of having to interpret or speculate ourselves. But yeah, it seems like anything related to SAC stuff in that role, then it's limited to 2 people outside of an Open meeting. So I think that the way you could do it too is have 2 people working and then maybe bring an update to the group. Another 2 people could work on it in between. They could even have special meetings, we'd have to work out in the schedule, but like you could just, if you really want to meet with more than 2 people, you could just have an open meeting if the schedule time allows it and do it over Zoom then. So I think that there are ways to do it. And it seems like some of these may be individual, but I see what you're saying. And maybe we could get legal advice on some of the details. Like if we voted that, yes, we want to create this curriculum out in the open, and then, get better legal advice. Can 3 people work on creating the curriculum and then bring it back to the group? I don't know, but I think there are people who know better.
Mm-hmm. It definitely feels like a lot of these would best be served by actually being from the city of Urbana, more so than like, hey, I'm this random person that put together this thing. Come do it, or come join or help out with this proposal, or, whatever. So just a thought. I guess we could just start by 2 people could volunteer for an item for starters, or I don't know, or we volunteer for more than 1 item. I don't know. What were you thinking, Stacy? Or just like volunteering for one thing?
So I guess I just want to review first that the items that we're probably considering are the ones that are in green that we say now and soon for. For ones that have oranges, not yet, or maybe some mixed, then maybe those are not, the priorities that are rising up to the level. And then I also recognize that there's more priorities that have been created by this body on these 4 different pages than what maybe any individual person has the capacity to work on. So I do think let's just say, I would leave it up to you as individual members of the commission to think about the capacity that you have and any personal goals that you have. And if any of the ideas are something that is really exciting and very interesting to you at this time, then maybe go ahead and put your name by that to lead that up. If we have 3 people that are all excited about the same subject, I don't know if there's, we'll draw straws or something. But I would say, if you chose 1 or 2, that would be great. And if you're also somebody that can't take anything on right now at all at this time, then that's okay. So we may not end up having every goal prioritized for this year, but for the ones that we feel that we have capacity to work on.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any committee members that are absent right now? Just curious.
Morgan isn't here tonight.
Oh, just Morgan. Okay.
And we do have an open seat at the moment.
Gotcha.
And I think on here too, as I'm seeing your screen, the purple sticky would be for if you are going to volunteer.
Yep. So the idea was use the pink sticky or purplish sticky and write like whether this is something, put your name on it, and whether, and I guess we don't even have to decide if you want to like spearhead it or help with it based on our discussion if we only have like 2 or 3 people working on it anyway. So it doesn't really matter. And even I'd say if 3 people volunteer, like the idea that Grace had of kind of working through if people want to like have 2 people meet at a time or do the open meeting thing, that's super cool. So yeah. So do we want to just take time like looking at each screen individually or just being on the Jamboard? Again, I think this link has been shared. It's the same one that we worked on at the last meeting. So I think it's out there somewhere. Is everyone able to edit on this? The people who have joined?
I'm able to.
Okay, so then probably everyone can.
has anyone having trouble accessing it? Okay. It might be nice to kind of review them together. Maybe we could let everybody review maybe quietly for just a few minutes, and then we can come back and discuss.
Okay, so just like silently reading through them.
Yeah, just for a few minutes.
Okay.
Like probably 7:55.
I'd say let's leave them up on the screen for the.
Yeah, and we'll leave them on the screen as well.
We're going to be changing.
Just let me know when you want me to click to the next one.
Time it out as you see fit.
Okay, so it seems like 4 items on this one that could be potential action items to move forward with. Are we good with this time that we've looked at this? Okay, so just moving on to the next one then. Okay, gonna go ahead and move on. Again, it seems like there are 4 prioritized goals on this one as well. Okay, moving on to the last one here.
All right, do you want to go back to community involvement? So on the community involvement page, it looked like some of the possible priorities in the short term were around boosting community involvement with the SAC, eliciting input from community members, developing plans for tree planting programs to combat environmental racism, potentially attending meetings and teaming up with other organizations, kind of finding partnerships, and also expanding outreach efforts for solar and energy efficiency programs with local partners. There are no peak stickies that I've noticed that anybody has put on. So if that's wrong, let me know. And then the one that I think that was a major priority was around the tree planting programs. And I think that we have, since this process has been taking a number of months, that we've worked on this quite a bit, and that Scott's worked on this quite a bit within the city and has updated and created some new plans around tree planting to create more equity for where trees are planted within the community. So I think that that's excellent, that in a way that we're checking that box. Any other comments on this page?
I mean, one thing I'm noticing is like on this page and then the third page, these are kind of similar goals, like boosting SAC, community input to the SAC from the community involvement page, and then also promoting accessibility and SAC and community programs are kind of just both like, you know, doing more of sharing information, stuff like that. But I think those are kind of the same goal, which is good. That's just a comment that I have. I'm still having a hard time personally deciding what I want to do as my like main thing. So that's what I'm going through over here right now. I don't know if you want to go back to this second one. That Pete's volunteering, wonderful. Oh, lost it.
Sorry about that.
All good.
Okay, under city operations, so promoting community involvement in city planning and zoning discussions. I see this for me as being a little bit of a stretch goal and a commitment on my part to learn more about city planning and zoning discussions, perhaps attend a few more of their meetings, and to meet who is even on the plan commission. So I'll be doing a little bit of thinking around that and what that looks like. I think before promoting community involvement, I have a bit of learning to do, but I do see this as a stretch goal and one that I'm interested in. Going back one just for a second here, I think that everybody agreed on the accessibility and inclusivity. Folks did make it kind of a clear priority about transitioning to the use of gender neutral and inclusive language in our meeting spaces and in our documents. It's not something that I am actively thinking about all the time in presentations or in necessarily my own speech. So I would just say that, like, it's a question, how can we actively do this and make sure that there's just a check to make sure that we're using gender neutral and inclusive language for the community.
I think that it depends how we set it up, could just be self-correct. And I mean, I think it's not to say never using gendered language if someone identifies as such, like if I'm comfortable with she, her pronouns, that's okay. But I think just establishing it, like we could have it in our Zoom names. I see Jess does. Mine's automatic. I do in my council ones. But, I think that's a helpful thing just to let people identify how they would like to be referred when we're creating official documents. If it has personal pronouns, making those more inclusive. And this is something, the city council also passed a resolution on this like the last term too. So, I think that this is not an isolated thing. And they were even put some money towards redoing a lot of the city documents to revise them as gender neutral, gender inclusive. So I think it would be helpful. What I was thinking with that is in official documentation, when we have, people to the group, just kind of making that space for people to self-identify their gender and making it comfortable so that if someone did prefer they, them pronouns, it would not be, a thing. Like our system's already set up for.
So we don't actually have any documents that we need to go through to make sure that we just don't have that.
We may. I haven't gone through the ordinance if they say, commission members. I don't know how they refer if they use personal pronouns. I'm not sure.
I think the only other thing that we could do, obviously, with this would be like to invite someone in to speak to us about it so that we can be, more knowledgeable and careful and intentional with our language. Is that something that we want to do, or?
I would want to check to see if there are any resources that are already made available by the city, and then take a look at that, see what those resources are, perhaps report back on them in a future meeting. And if we find that we still have questions or would like some further training on the subject, then to think about who we could invite for a presentation.
I'm just going to say that I would like to volunteer for providing educational resources to teachers, blah, blah, blah. I think one person doing that on their own, that could be like a full-time job. So I'm going to, do my best with that to get that going, to get something going. And if in doing so, I think it would be best if I kind of utilized, like maybe even just thinking about Champaign and Urbana. I don't know if that's allowed, or maybe I can just focus on Urbana first, but we'll see. I'm putting my name there and then involving students in our work as well. I would like to kind of deep dive on that as well.
There could be some overlap there. And thank you for volunteering for that. I absolutely recognize the heavy lift that you talk about with that. And one of the groups that I'm just wondering if this is already part of something that they're working on or would like to implement further would be the Champaign County Climate Coalition that's being headed up by the Parks District. I don't know if you know Savannah, I don't know her last name, but I'd be happy to make an introduction and would like to explore perhaps that there is some educational programming around sustainability that the Parks District has created and may be interested in partnering on or finding some additional folks to help promote it.
I mean, I guess as a final note, I would volunteer to make a flyer for anything ever because I just do that stuff all the time anyway. I'm not really on social media, so I don't think I would be, capable of necessarily being kind of this role of like this communications role. But always, I pay for Canva. So I would gladly make anything that we need. They have Instagram posts and whatever. So just throwing that out there if there's ever a need for something to be made for any of the stuff that we're doing.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are we pretty good on the screen share here, or does it seem like everyone has kind of their direction to go then?
So it looked like on community involvement on 4 that Andy put a sticky note for expanding outreach for solar and energy efficiency. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm kind of already doing that, so that's
wonderful. And also that Andy is also interested in working on the city planning and zoning discussions, so that's fantastic. Tomas, you have a sticky note on the city operations page and the what other initiatives need to be proposed. I'm wondering if that's a holdover from previous work or if that's a new sticky note that you added today.
I had just added it. You're referring to the what other initiatives need to be proposed to address
yes
and come back. Yes. Yeah, I added that as something that I could, potentially pay some attention to.
Great.
I would as well. I think that was my pink sticky from before. It looks like a weird CW. I think that's me.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't sure. Okay, thanks, Grace.
I think so. I don't remember it, but I think that was one from last time. So I'd be happy to buddy up with Tomas on that daunting one. Important, but big one.
Mm-hmm.
Great, okay. On accessibility, we're going to look into some resources already provided by the city on gender neutral and inclusive language, and then consider a presentation for the future. And then on the last, on education outreach, right, we know, so Jess has put her name next to the providing educational resources for teachers and organizations. Jess and Tomas on involving school district students and youth in our environmental work. looks great. And then also environmental justice, Tomas, Jess, and myself as well. And something that I'll be working, I'm working on environmental justice planning through the Resilience Committee with the Illinois Climate Action Plan at the university, which is involving community members. So I look forward to really picking up on that work starting in the spring semester. And I'd be happy to work with you, Tomas, and Jess as well.
Yeah, I definitely see myself kind of more supporting role if help is needed for any of that stuff. It seems kind of connected to the other two things I volunteered for. So just throwing that out there.
Great.
All righty.
Hi, I'm just gonna say, Jess, thank you so much for creating the Jamboard and Jamboard experience for the SAC. I know we probably could have gotten through all of this in a 4-hour meeting on one day that we could have had 5 months ago. But just the nature of working together on this and through SAC meetings, not that the work was necessarily slow and done in public, but I think it was an enriching experience, and I look forward to coming back to the Jamboard from time to time and hearing updates from folks. As you have updates and you want to have an agenda item included on a future meeting, let me know. We'll get that included in there. I'm not going to hound people and say, hey, what did you do this month? Hey, what did you do this month? But it'll be more of a kind of taking the personal responsibility route of letting me know that you've got something that you want to present on or that you've got an idea. And if also you just want to bounce ideas, something that you volunteered for and you want to talk about it at any time, my door is sort of open to that, and I'd be happy to have a conversation. I see someone. Grace, are you raising your hand? Yes, go ahead. You're on mute.
Muted. 2 hands up. So yes, I appreciate all of the planning on this. I know we spent a lot of time on these JEDI goals, and I just do want to be sure that we kind of finish up strong and have a clear direction. And I think that this was a great round of people volunteering and kind of taking ownership and pairing off. And I was trying to put these into some sort of a table that I kind of started before with council. We had a really helpful like strategic goal planning setting meeting and talking about, the actionable stuff and having a timeline and the responsible party. So I don't know if I could just like share real quick and then we can move on, but I'd be happy to keep working on this too. I was trying to keep up with some of the notes with a partner too, like maybe Jess, since Jess is very familiar with the Jamboard and all the ideas on there. But so it's just kind of, the ideas, but just stacking them into what I would hope, what I feel like would be an effective end of this kind of planning would be to have that measurable goal, who's doing it, and a when part. As Stacey said, not hounding people each month, but like, generally by next year or within 6 months, and we can kind of follow up periodically and see what the updates are. So just wondering your thoughts on that, if you'd be interested in continuing that.
I would gladly help with that. I agree that having just like a concise list of here's, what people volunteered for and just something that we can like go back to for reference would be easier to look at than digging through the jam. So I'm totally cool with that.
So do you think we could add that to like, I agree we have been talking about this a lot, but I feel like it is such an ongoing thing. And it's like, if we're making progress, I think it would be appropriate to have kind of regular updates on it. So I don't know if there's interest or willingness to have, we can work on this in between the next meeting and have just for a final, what do people think for their time? And I think we can even email this out in the meantime with the packet too, and people can review it and kind of think ahead of time.
Are you thinking, Grace, that between now and then we would just kind of marry this with the goals that have actually been volunteered for, just kind of bring it to just those goals. And then at the next meeting, people would then kind of state what their objective measure and all of that stuff is for the actual goal that they volunteered for, or what were you thinking on that?
I feel like I would like to go through the Jamboard and kind of just organize it in this pattern, because I feel like on the Jamboard now, some of them are already really big picture stuff. And then some of them are specific. Like one of them was raise awareness of environmental justice concepts, and then other ones, Sustainability Week and other events. And it's like, could those all fit under the broad category of community outreach? And then we come up with what I think ideally the measure would be, what is a realistic action step that you plan on taking within a certain time frame?
So you do want to include the goals that were not volunteered for on this, you're thinking? You know what I mean? Like the Sustainability Week is awesome, but no one volunteered for that, right? I think.
Oh yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I was trying to put, like, for the goals, this was the ones that had like the majority green stickies on the Jamboard. And then, yeah, I think that the other details from there, I would need time, and I would be happy to kind of look at the Jamboard and see which of those things that did get volunteered for are actually a measurable thing and what's the objective. So I'd like to just kind of organize the Jamboard into this. And then, yes, there's definitely lots of other room for people to, adapt or come up with their own ideas, set their own timeline, however it might be.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you want help with that, I will gladly help. If you want it, but if you don't need it, like, totally cool too. So.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be useful, and we can add that into it'll be the February meeting.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I would like, as part of that, I don't know that it's in color coding or bold or emphasis, but if there's a way to capture what on the Jamboard were considered the short-term, medium-term, long-term priorities, as a way to kind of show that those were kind of discussed or addressed in that framework. And then also just kind of noting, what we feel we have individual capacity for. But what I'd like to do is, then part of the spreadsheet or the tracking sheet, as we might call it, I would like to follow up with, I don't know about City Council, follow up with the mayor. I have provided the Jamboard previously, a printed version, to Mayor Marlin, so she knows that these have been discussions that we've been having in the Sustainability Commission. So as a way to kind of provide that back, I think that this could be useful for her to see that as well, in kind of that organized information way, show what we're interested in, show what we think we have capacity to work on, show different areas of in a way, it shows our areas of expertise and the things that we're very interested in working on and where we could be more effectively used or leveraged by the city on sustainability efforts. And I'd also like to share what we come up with the folks who are working on the comprehensive plan. I could see that, not all of this, but some of this could certainly end up making its way into the city's comprehensive plan. And I'd like to see that. Okay. All right, any last thoughts on Jamboard or planning?
Just wondering if we have an announcement. I feel like we usually have an announcement at the agenda. I just realized we don't this one.
We don't, but I'm more than happy to add it in. I don't have any announcements. Does anyone have announcements that they'd like to share?
I was going to share one that just came up, is the city's equity and quality of life project. that's up on their website and social media stuff. It's on the city main page, like you click the middle button. I was gonna try and screen share and show, but yeah, so you can search it's Urbana Equity and Quality of Life project, and they're looking for infrastructure projects in high needs areas, underserved communities. And it's a really quick form that just asks the location, proposed project, and why it would improve safety and promote health. So it looks like they've been working with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. And so they have it kind of focused on things like lighting and sidewalks and accessibility, but it's open for other things too, general infrastructure like sewage or park beautification or whatever someone might want. So I think that this was, it's proposed as a way for getting broad public input on infrastructure needs, especially focused on equity. And there is $2 million to be spread between some of these projects. They're looking for projects of 250,000 or less, which as far as infrastructure, surprisingly doesn't go that far. But just putting it out there for your networks or for anyone who may watch this meeting, the City Equity and Quality of Life project. And they're just opened that short little form for submissions.
Great, thank you for bringing our awareness to that. All right, any other announcements? Okay, thanks everybody for attending tonight, and I hope you all have a nice holiday season.